Hello everybody, it's me, it's Obli, and today I wanted to bring you everything that you need to know about Unholy DK moving into Midnight. We have the pre-patch, just a couple of weeks away. I can't imagine things are going to be overhauled very much now. I think in terms of the core abilities and rotation that they want in for the spec, it's now in. It's time to talk about it. It's time to talk about what you can do, how you can play it, all that jazz. So, join me. We'll talk about rotation, we'll talk about gear, we'll talk about tips and tricks. So you're ready to hop straight into the beta and play the shit out of the spec. Let's go right now. First things first, wounds completely gone. I think a lot of people didn't like wounds. It's now completely just gone. You kind of have a similar structure now, but instead of it being a debuff on the target, making your target switching really poor, it's now kind of a buff on yourself where you summon a ghoul instead. You gain these stacks by casting Festering Strike, you spend these stacks by casting Scourge Strike. They summon a ghoul does damage. Brilliant. Death and Decay is basically unusable now. You just don't really use it as a Unholy DK. You kind of do in Blood still, but as an Unholy DK, all it can really provide you is the additional chance of getting a Vampiric Strike proc when you're in it as a Sand Lane. I don't even really do this unless I am down bad on procs. That's when I'll really think, okay, fuck it, I'll put a Death and Decay down. But to be honest, I don't really use Death and Decay at all. So unless something really changes with that, I don't think you guys will be ever using it. So Death and Decay is something you just don't really have to worry about at all. Scourge Strike now cleaves basically on its own. So it's got its own ramping buff. As you use Scourge Strike, every cast increases the amount of targets it can hit. And it can stack up to between 5 and then you can talent into 7. So you don't really have to worry too much about being stood in a Death and Decay anymore, which is brilliant. I think everybody wanted this. But one thing I would say is keep an eye on that buff, because if you're moving to the next pack and you know the abilities that you need to do when you're entering this next pack, if your Clawing Shadows buff is about to run out, it would be in your best interest just to quickly fire one out there just to keep that 7 stack or that 5 stack from expiring, so you don't have to wait like 5 globals later in order for your Clawing Shadows to be doing maximum damage. We have 2 diseases now. One disease is an AoE disease. It doesn't do lots of damage on its own, but when there's multiple targets, it can quickly ramp up. And you have one single target disease called Dread Plague. Now, this disease has a couple of interactions with it as well, but you can only apply this onto one target, and it does a lot of damage. It is a lot of single target damage. You always want to have this on a main target for sure. There are many talents in our kit that can interact with our diseases, making it do erupt damage, which is just doing a certain percentage of effectiveness damage. One of the most impressive ones is Pestilence, and there's 2 different types of Pestilence. There's the Pestilence that comes from a certain enchant that we'll go on later, and then there's the talent. So it's not a baseline, it's just a talent, and all it does is makes your diseases do a shitload of damage in one go in your 45-second burst, because it's attached to Dark Transformation. This is something we were asking for a long time, because Unholy really suffered from 45-second bursts, especially on retail. Sudden Doom now does not proc off of auto attacks. It actually procs off of Dread Plague, our single target disease. So you have so much freedom now with where you need to be in the playing area when you're fighting something. So the only things that you actually need to be in melee range for is your melee attacks, Festering Strike, and Soul Reaper if you talent that. But if you're not talented into Soul Reaper and you have loads of ghoul stacks, you get to fuck off. It's brilliant. And you can just do anything else and you're going to be doing almost full damage. It is such a big quality of life increase. I love it. When spec'd into Mages of the Dead, there's only 2 ways to actually spawn them, because Sudden Doom no longer actually gives you Magi. So the first way is obviously when you cast Dark Transformation or Army of the Dead, just like retail, you'll get a Magus. And you also have this new talent called Reanimation, which is when you cast Putrefy, our new signature ability, you spawn a Magus as well. So we'll also talk about Putrefy now too. So Putrefy is basically an ability that you cast on cooldown, and it just sends a ghoul, does a good load of damage, but also if you're talented into Blight Burst, this Putrefy will apply dots to everything around the explosion area, the target areas, the person that you send your Putrefied Ghoul to. But that target will also now attain Dread Plague too, so you do want to be careful about who you're putrefying, because if you want your Dread Plague to stay on a target that's taking extra damage, you don't want to putrefy something over here and then lose the Dread Plague off of that. But it does recover its charge. Every time you cast Clawing Shadows, you do recover a bit of the cooldown of Putrefy. And you have 2 charges if you spec into that too, which you basically always do because it's such a good ability and it interacts with so much. So using Clawing Shadows does recover the cooldown, much like how when casting Rhyme recovers the cooldown of Empowering Weapon. Putrefy is buffed by anything that buffs minion damage. Commander of the Dead being one of those things, meaning if you cast Dark Transformation, 50% increased damage to Putrefy, naturally you'd think, yeah, okay, I'll hold it. But just bear in mind, if you're sat on 2 charges and you hold for too long, those 5 seconds could cost you just 1 overall usage out of the course of a fight, and then all of a sudden you've just lost putrefy damage by 100% instead of gaining it by 50. One of the biggest things we received was our Apex talent, and this is called Forbidden Knowledge. When you cast Army of the Dead, your Death Coil and your Epidemic is greatly improved. It's transformed into these new abilities, with Death Coil becoming Necrotic Coil, which just shoots a line, does damage through everything in the line, does a big wad of damage to the end target. And then Graveyard is just Epidemic on steroids. Exactly the same ability, but just does fucking shitloads more damage. So naturally, this just makes our 1.5 minute burst really nice, but it doesn't really change your gameplay. In terms of rotational changes, when you cast Death Coil and Epidemic, it's Death Coil up to 4 targets, then it's Epidemic thereafter. But when you're in your Forbidden Knowledge, it's Necrotic Coil up to 7 targets, and then Graveyard thereafter. Festamite, completely removed. Axed, which is good. I don't think many people even give a shit about Festamite. But they did replace it with a much weaker version, and this is now based off of spending runic power. I think this is supposed to synergize with Gargoyle, but you don't really pick Gargoyle still. It's still not that good. They really should buff that boy. But realistically, you don't even really play it, to be honest. But it's there/not there. There is a talent that you can pick, which will enhance your new Lesser Ghouls to do Sweeping Claw damage. So essentially, every time you cast Dark Transformation, it will enhance their claw ability to start doing AoE as well. So it just kind of gives us a bit more oomph in our 4 to 5 second window, which is good. In terms of the hero talents, it looks like Sand Lane is really synergizing well with new Unholy, with the way that Sand Lane gives us a lot of disease benefits. And to be honest, Rider it doesn't really do much for us in terms of our kit. It just kind of gives you about 30 to 40% extra damage from its kit, and it's all passive, basically. There's not really much interaction you can do with it. It does fall slightly behind Sand Lane at the moment, but this is purely a tuning thing. In terms of quality of life, obviously Rider feels a lot better because you don't have to keep up the Essence Queen buff, and in Sand Lane you have that 7 stack. It kind of is a bit annoying if you have to restack it. But in terms of the element of difficulty, if you wanted to trade off a slightly, and I really mean slightly, more annoying playstyle for a bit less damage, you would just go Rider. But all in all, I personally enjoy Sand Lane. The way Sand Lane plays a bit better. 2 really interesting things about our gear this season, which I'm hyped about, is no longer do you really care much about haste mastery, but more crit mastery. With the way that crit scales now and the type of profile that we've been given, crit and mastery just scale a lot better. There are people smarter than I that have done the maths behind this, and they have said crit and mastery is the way to go. And I believe them, because crit and mastery on the beta right now, I am slamming with. In addition to that as well, Fallen Crusader is no longer the #1 go-to choice for Unholy DK as your weapon enchant. We've been using Rune of the Apocalypse at the moment, and the dot that the Rune of the Apocalypse actually gives you is big. It actually interacts with your Lesser Ghouls, giving your Lesser Ghouls a chance to apply this dot, and this dot can ramp up a lot, especially if you have a lot of Lesser Ghouls, which you do. So now you run Rune of the Apocalypse. This could be subject to some tuning changes. I hope not, because actually I really like the idea of having a different rune forge for a different spec, having Blood have one, Frost have one, Unholy have one, and then instead of a whole new gear set that you have to farm, it's just maybe a weapon. Last but not least, Festing Scythe was changed now, so it's a bit different to how it works on retail. Instead of giving everything wounds every now and then, instead, as soon as you use Festing Strike, you unlock the capability to do it again, but now it's a scythe that hits everything in a cone in front of you and applies this debuff that hastens how quick dots will do their damage. So you naturally want to keep this on every target pretty much all the time. It's good, it's free, doesn't cost you any runes to do, doesn't give you any runic power, but it does put this debuff on targets, which is very decent. So what is the rotation for new Unholy? Well, it's very, very simple. The first thing you want to worry about is Putrefy, using that on cooldown as much as possible. If you have your burst window coming up, if you can afford to hold the charges so you don't lose any, definitely do that. Then you want to look at getting some Ghoul stacks. You want to use Festing Strike to get yourself some stacks. And then after that, you want to apply Festing Scythe. Pretty much all build, all run Festing Scythe. So you do Festing Strike instantly again, Festing Scythe. Now with those 2 abilities cast, you will have a healthy amount of Lesser Ghoul stacks you can spend with Scourge Strike. So you want to start doing that. However, when you get close to runic power capping, then spend it with either Epidemic or Death Coil. And that's your entire rotation. If you're expecting to Soul Reaper, you might want to look at weaving in Soul Reapers as much as you can, basically on cooldown. What about dots? Well, if you're talented into Blightburst, which you should be in any sort of cleave or AoE scenario, even some single target scenarios, you'd really want to be Blightburst. But this talent makes Putrefy apply dots to everything around it, Dread Plague to the current target. So naturally, the sheer amount of automatic Putrefies that are going on, the Putrefies that you're doing, they will apply the dots for you. In addition to that, when you cast Clawing Shadows, that will spread Virulent Plague to another target as well. So you often don't need to cast Outbreak, pretty much ever, to be honest. So you don't need to worry about dot management at all. When it comes to Sand Lane and Rider, Rider doesn't really have much ramp up time, so you can just cast your army and just start spamming and just go ham. However, with Sand Lane, there is a bit of an emphasis of getting yourself up to your 7 stack of Essence of the Blood Queen. So just look at your runic power and just see if you're close to capping. Every time you do get close to capping, use a Graveyard, use a Necrotic Coil. But once you get to that 7 stack, now you can just dump all that runic power and start using your runic power spenders as much as possible instead. So it's kind of like Vampiric Strike has the top priority until 7, without overcapping of course, and then it's now runic power spenders have the top priority, weaving in Vampiric Strikes. Now with Sudden Doom, you do want to spend these as soon as you get them because they give you a strength buff when you do spend them. But there is an argument to be made that if you already have Visceral Strength running from Sand Lane, you can hold on to a charge to try and ramp up to your 7 stack of Essence buff and just hold on to that Sudden Doom. However, as soon as you hit that 2nd stack, it needs to be spent straight away because you don't want to risk overcapping and losing out on a potential Sudden Doom charge. So when you have 1, you're kind of safe to min-max a little bit. When you have 2, get that spent instantly. It goes without saying as well that in Rider you don't get the Visceral Strength buff, so that this doesn't really apply there. If you're playing Rider, just spend your Sudden Dooms like straight away. If you are talented into Soul Reaper, then really you should be talented into Reaping as well, because what Reaping does, when you cast Dark Transformation, it allows Soul Reaper to be cast on any target, no matter what the health, for free. So what you want to do is cast Dark Transformation and then cast Soul Reaper right after. Now, Soul Reaper sends out all your Putrefy charges, so you don't want to use Soul Reaper before, waste all your Putrefy charges, then do Dark Transformation and miss out on the free damage. It's not really worth it. So Dark Transformation, full burst window, Soul Reaper first, sends out the Putrefies, and you can just go to town. It's brilliant. In terms of quality of life, it's actually really nice. It makes for a very nice flow. However, it's not the strongest in AoE. It is pretty good in single target. When it comes to AoE versus single target, we're in a really nice position where the rotation is pretty much exactly the same. You do really want to focus on weaving your abilities together. Even though Epidemic hits really hard, Scourge Strike comes with a lot of benefits by casting it. Things like recharging your Putrefy quicker, giving you these ghouls which do AoE damage. In terms of rotation, it's super simple and you don't really have to change much. It's just swapping Death Coil and Epidemic. Alrighty, so they are my go-to tips, my guide on how to play Unholy in its current form. Obviously, this video could be completely outdated. They could absolutely just destroy Unholy at some point. But to be honest, if I was a betting man, I would bet money on it this pretty much staying kind of how it is. But you never know. There is a long cycle left before this goes live and Midnight goes live. The pre-patch is coming, so in my head, it makes sense that Blizzard are going to try and hunker down on something that they like for Unholy. Who knows? I'm not a dev, and we know what the devs are like. But anyway, if you like the video, stay subscribed for some more Death Knight content, more WoW content. We're going to have so much stuff to talk about when Midnight comes out. I cannot wait. If you want coaching or you want to talk about DKs in general, join my Discord. There's so much stuff there. I'm going to have some builds and some talents that I use in the description below as well, so check them out. But anyways, have a lovely Christmas, have a lovely New Year, and I'll see you later. Bye.